In 2011, commuters crossing a bustling highway bridge were stunned by the sight of the dead bodies of cartel rivals dangling from the railings, and a terrifying message scrawled in blood-red paint next to them. This was more than just a murder. It was a declaration of dominance. In a country where whispers of danger mingle with the rustling of palm trees, farmers have become the masters, and a quiet land of plenty has become a global center of terror, power, and bloodshed. How did a peaceful farming state become the heart of a cartel that shook nations to their core? Uncover the truth about the rise of Sinaloa, where beauty masks brutality and fear is the currency of power. This is not just history. It is a warning. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Sinaloa wasn't the thriving hub of illegal trade it is today. It was just another state where farmers worked tirelessly to make ends meet. The problem? Prices for crops like corn and beans hit rock bottom. The harvests barely covered their costs, and every growing season felt like a losing battle. Families struggled to survive, and desperation was setting in. But then, something changed. A single decision that altered their fate forever. Farmers turned to growing poppies for opium and cultivating marijuana. These weren't just crops. They were lifelines. And why? Because demand in the United States and Europe was skyrocketing. Suddenly, there was an opportunity to make money like never before. Unlike traditional crops, narcotic plants offered profits that were 10, even 20 times higher. And the best part? You didn't need fancy equipment or big budgets to get started. With just some metal barrels, wooden sticks, and a few basic tools, farmers could process raw opium resin right in their backyards. It was simple, cheap, and incredibly lucrative. In these isolated villages, a new kind of industry began to take shape. What started as a way to survive quickly turned into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But here's the twist. The farmers weren't doing it alone. They had a natural ally, the Sierra Madre Mountains. This rugged and sprawling mountain range that cuts through Sinaloa became their fortress, their shield from the authorities. The terrain was unforgiving, steep slopes, thick jungles, and winding trails that only locals knew how to navigate. It was nearly impossible for law enforcement to reach these remote areas, let alone shut them down. The climate in the mountains was a farmer's dream. Bright sunny days, consistent humidity, and rich, fertile soil created the perfect environment for growing poppies and marijuana. Combined with the isolation provided by the mountains, it was like nature itself was working in their favor. Over time, this small-scale operation grew into something much bigger. By the 1980s, the game had changed. The emerging cartel wasn't just planting seeds in the ground, they were investing in technology. Modern irrigation systems boosted yields, genetic modifications produced hardier crops, and processing methods became more efficient. What started as a survival tactic turned into a highly sophisticated production line. The workforce expanded too. Locals, along with immigrants from other regions, were hired to work the fields. But the real power lay in the hands of the cartel, which controlled every step of the process, from growing and harvesting to refining and transporting the finished product. The mountains became the beating heart of this operation. It was here that raw materials were transformed into the drugs that would flood markets around the world. Sinaloa went from being just another Mexican state to becoming the nerve center of a global drug empire. This wasn't just a business. It was the foundation of what would soon be known as the Sinaloa Cartel, an organization so powerful, so far-reaching, that it became the face of the international narcotics trade. And that's how a picturesque farming region turned into the launchpad for the most notorious drug cartel in history, a cartel that would leave its mark on every corner of the globe. Imagine how drugs cultivated on the remote mountain plantations of Sinaloa make their way to the United States, the largest market for illegal substances in the world. The Sinaloa cartel didn't just view transportation as a necessity for their business. They elevated it into an art form, developing methods that are both ingenious and astonishing in their complexity. One of their most renowned strategies involves the use of underground tunnels. These are not ordinary passageways. They are engineering marvels stretching for kilometers, linking Mexico directly to the United States. Equipped with ventilation systems, rail tracks, and even elevators, these tunnels showcase the cartel's dedication to efficiency. In one such tunnel discovered in San Diego, law enforcement uncovered a stash of drugs valued at tens of millions of dollars. And this is just one example among hundreds of similar structures hidden beneath the border. But the story doesn't end with tunnels. The cartel has also perfected the use of airplanes. These aren't just private jets or small cargo planes. They include commercial flights where drugs are concealed in the most unsuspecting places. From fruit boxes and furniture to household appliances, the ingenuity behind their smuggling methods continues to evolve. The skies became their next frontier, allowing them to bypass traditional border checks with alarming success. When it comes to the sea, the Sinaloa cartel has established a vast network of ships and yachts to ferry their products. These vessels navigate the Pacific Ocean, delivering narcotics directly to American ports. However, their most impressive maritime innovation is the use of submarines. Yes, submarines. Picture this. Small, custom-built submersibles capable of transporting up to 5 tons of cocaine in a single journey, gliding unnoticed past even the most vigilant coastal defenses. These submarines are constructed deep in the jungles of Colombia and then transported to the coast, where they are loaded with drugs and sent on their clandestine missions. Some of these submersibles are so advanced that they can travel thousands of kilometers without needing to surface. If this sounds like fiction, consider the major 2022 operation by the U.S. Coast Guard, which intercepted a submarine carrying 5 tons of cocaine. Yet, such victories are rare. Experts estimate that law enforcement manages to detect and intercept only about 11% of these submarines. The remaining 89%? They quietly reach their destinations without incident. The Sinaloa cartel's logistical operations are not just about moving drugs. They are about staying ahead of the game. By constantly innovating and adopting cutting-edge methods, they maintain a significant advantage over law enforcement agencies. Their operations demonstrate a level of sophistication that continues to push the boundaries of what's possible in the underworld of drug trafficking. This is just one component of the Sinaloa cartel's sprawling empire. It's not merely a criminal organization. It's a shadow empire, rewriting the rules of smuggling and reshaping the very nature of organized crime on a global scale. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera, a man who rose from a humble boy in a poor village to a legendary drug lord known around the globe. How did this become possible? El Chapo was born in the small village of La Tuna, Sinaloa, in 1957. This was one of those regions in Mexico where poverty and hopelessness were part of daily life. The Guzman family worked in agriculture, but their earnings were barely enough to survive. From an early age, Joaquin observed local farmers cultivating poppies, which were later processed into heroin. Young Joaquin helped his father and dreamed of escaping the vicious cycle of poverty. Though his formal education ended after just a few years of primary school, he possessed a sharp understanding of one truth: money rules everything. In the 1980s, his life took a dramatic turn. Guzman joined the Guadalajara cartel, led by Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as the godfather of Mexican cartels. Joaquin quickly became one of Gallardo's trusted associates. He was instrumental in developing drug transportation routes into the United States, utilizing trucks, planes, and even tunnels. The real turning point came in 1989, after Felix Gallardo's arrest. El Chapo, along with a few other leaders, divided Guadalajara's territory, giving rise to the Sinaloa cartel. Guzman began solidifying his power, setting the foundation for what would become one of the most powerful drug cartels in the world. El Chapo built a true empire. His cartel became the largest supplier of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, and marijuana to the United States and beyond. It's estimated that his annual revenues reached billions of dollars. But it wasn't just his wealth that ensured his influence. Guzman became a cultural icon in Mexico. In the Sinaloa region, he was revered as a folk hero. Many believed El Chapo supported the poor, funding schools, roads, and churches. His image was immortalized in narco corridos, folk songs glorifying drug traffickers. This generosity, however, was part of a calculated strategy. He knew that gaining the loyalty of the local population would help shield him from law enforcement. At the same time, Guzman didn't shy away from extreme violence to deal with his enemies. Mass executions, dismemberments, and torture were common practices of the Sinaloa cartel. In 1993, Joaquin Guzman was arrested in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but incarceration did little to hinder him. El Chapo continued running the cartel from behind bars with access to mobile phones, money, and even women. In 2001, he pulled off an escape that shocked the world. El Chapo fled Puente Grande prison. According to legend, he was smuggled out in a laundry cart. In reality, the escape was a meticulously planned operation, likely involving corrupt officials. Once free, Guzman became a ghost, eluding Mexican authorities. In 2014, he was captured again, but just 2 years later, he staged another escape. This time, he disappeared through a tunnel dug directly beneath his prison cell. The incident further embarrassed Mexico's justice system. Finally, in 2016, he was recaptured. El Chapo was extradited to the United States, where he faced 10 charges, including drug trafficking, murder, and money laundering. In 2019, Guzman was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. He was sent to the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This marked the end of his reign. But does it signify the end of the Sinaloa cartel? Absolutely not. His legacy lives on through his sons, known as Los Chapitos, who have taken over the empire he built. When Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was imprisoned in the United States maximum security facility, many believed it marked the end of the Sinaloa cartel. But this was merely the beginning of a new chapter. After El Chapo, the reins of the organization were taken over by his sons, known as Los Chapitos. Who are Los Chapitos? Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, and Ovidio Guzman Lopez are 3 of El Chapo's sons, who grew up at the very heart of the narco world. They inherited not just the business, but also their father's ruthlessness, ambition, and adaptability in an ever-changing global landscape. Los Chapitos are known for their youth, brutality, and willingness to experiment with new strategies. Unlike El Chapo, who focused heavily on cocaine, the brothers shifted their attention to a more modern and highly profitable drug, fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, 50 times more potent than heroin, and 100 times stronger than morphine. It is faster to produce, cheaper to make, and generates astronomical profits. Los Chapitos have established large-scale fentanyl production, making it the cartel's primary product. Key ingredients are sourced from China and transformed into the lethal drug in clandestine labs across Mexico. According to law enforcement, a single cartel lab can produce thousands of doses daily. While the U.S. once battled a heroin epidemic, it now faces the fentanyl crisis, with devastating consequences for American communities. One of Los Chapitos' major achievements is the creation of the so-called last mile, an extensive wholesale distribution network that delivers drugs directly into the hands of street-level dealers across the United States. This system involves corrupt border officials who ensure drugs cross the border unimpeded, wholesale distributors who receive shipments at controlled warehouses, local gangs and groups who distribute the drugs on the streets of American cities. This structure enables the cartel to maintain control over drug trafficking even in the most remote areas of the U.S. Los Chapitos are infamous for their brutality. They eliminate competitors, forcing rival cartel members to either surrender or disappear along with their families. One of the most notorious incidents occurred in 2019, when Mexican authorities attempted to arrest Ovidio Guzman Lopez. The arrest triggered an all-out war on the streets of Culiacan. Cartel members blocked roads, set vehicles ablaze, and opened fire indiscriminately. This unprecedented mobilization forced the Mexican government to release Ovidio to prevent further civilian casualties. Unlike their father, the brothers do not attempt to build an image of folk heroes. They operate more aggressively, pragmatically, and with a single focus: profit. Their operations have led to an increase in drug-related deaths in the U.S., yet this does not deter them. Today, Los Chapitos are a primary target for both U.S. and Mexican special forces. The United States has offered multi-million-dollar rewards for information leading to their capture. But as long as they remain free, the Sinaloa cartel continues to strengthen its grip on the global drug trade. If the Sinaloa cartel holds on to anything as tightly as its drug trade, it is its methods of terror and corruption. These are two sides of the same coin, ensuring impunity and influence. The word sicario has long become synonymous with ruthlessness in Mexico. These are professional assassins working for the cartel. Their primary goal is to intimidate enemies, eliminate competitors, and instill fear among the general population. Each sicario squad has several levels. There are ordinary operatives, young men trained to shoot and torture, who carry out basic tasks such as executions and public displays. Torturers are specialists who not only kill, but also use brutal methods to extract information or intimidate others. At the top are elite killers, sharpshooters tasked with high-profile assassinations, such as targeting government officials or rival cartel leaders. One of the most infamous methods practiced by sicarios is dissolving bodies in acid. Santiago Meza, nicknamed El Pozolero, or the Soup Maker, confessed to dissolving over 300 bodies throughout his career. But their terror isn't limited to rivals. Sicarios often target civilians to force communities into submission. They leave severed heads in public places, post videos of torture on social media, and even conduct public executions. While the sicarios maintain fear and terror on the streets, corruption works quietly, but no less effectively. The Sinaloa cartel is considered one of the wealthiest criminal organizations in the world. These vast sums of money are used to bribe everyone who could be of use to the cartel. Police officers, often underpaid, accept bribes to turn a blind eye to cartel activities or even help with drug shipments. In many cases, officers receive dual salaries, one from the government and another from the cartel. Government officials, ranging from small-town mayors to high-ranking officials in the capital, are also influenced by the cartel's wealth. One of the most notorious cases involved Mexico's former Secretary of Public Security, Genaro Garcia Luna, who was accused of receiving millions of dollars from the cartel. Judges, lawyers, and prosecutors are not immune to the cartel's influence either. Many are paid to dismiss charges, lose evidence, or delay cases, ensuring that even if cartel members are arrested, they are quickly released on technicalities or lack of evidence. Ordinary citizens in cartel-controlled regions often have no choice but to cooperate. They are paid to stay silent, provide shelter for cartel members, or assist in transporting drugs. Corruption is not just a means to operate, it's also a tool of intimidation. People know that reporting the cartel to the authorities could backfire. Police or officials, already under the cartel's control, often betray informants, leading to their families disappearing or meeting brutal deaths. The combination of sicarios and corruption creates a vicious cycle. Terror forces people into submission, while corruption ensures impunity. It's a system that allows the cartel to operate at every level, from small villages in Sinaloa to the corridors of power in Mexico City. The drug wars in Mexico are a shadowy conflict that has persisted for decades, turning the country into an arena of unrelenting violence that claims thousands of lives each year. But how did it all begin? Why do cartels not only trade drugs, but also actively destroy one another? It all started with a fight over resources and territorial control. The golden age of cocaine in the 1980s and 1990s transformed drugs into the most profitable illegal business in the world. Control over supply routes, known as plazas, became key points of conflict. Whoever controlled these routes gained access to billions in profits. The Mexican government was often unprepared to confront the cartels. Corrupt officials and a complicit police force created an environment where cartels could operate with near impunity. The market fragmentation intensified the conflict. Large cartels like Sinaloa began clashing with emerging groups that sought a share of the market. One such group was Los Zetas, a militarized wing of another cartel that later broke away and became an independent force. In the early 1990s, cocaine remained the most lucrative drug, but everything changed with the emergence of methamphetamine. Producing methamphetamine was cheaper than cocaine, which required cultivating coca plants. Meth could be synthesized chemically, enabling cartels to establish labs almost anywhere. Its growing demand in the U.S. made it incredibly profitable. Methamphetamine also opened up new markets in regions where drugs hadn't been popular before, quickly becoming a major source of income for cartels. With new drugs and players entering the market, conflicts between cartels escalated dramatically. Cartels adopted increasingly brutal tactics, moving from armed skirmishes to outright terror. Public executions, dismemberments, kidnappings, and mass killings became common strategies for intimidating rivals and government forces. The weapons used in these conflicts include not only standard firearms, but also rocket launchers, explosives, and even armored vehicles. Government operations against cartels often lead to large-scale shootouts, with casualties among both combatants and civilians. One of the bloodiest episodes was the war between the Sinaloa cartel and Los Zetas. It was not just a fight for territory, but a battle for dominance. Known for their extreme brutality, Los Zetas carried out mass attacks on civilians, killing hundreds to force rival cartels into retreat. The drug wars have turned many Mexican cities into war zones, leaving civilians in constant fear. Kidnappings have become a daily occurrence. Victims are taken not only for ransom but also to be used as human shields in cartel conflicts. Mass graves have become a grim reality, with authorities regularly discovering burial sites in deserts and jungles left behind by cartels. The government has tried to combat the drug wars, but its efforts often resemble fighting a hydra. For every cartel destroyed, 2 new ones emerge. Operations targeting leaders, such as the capture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, have had symbolic effects, but have not resolved the problem. Military campaigns involve deploying troops to combat cartels, but these efforts often lead to even more civilian casualties. The Mexican army is the country's last line of defense in the fight against cartels, but its involvement in this conflict is a double-edged sword. Soldiers are tasked with confronting well-organized and well-armed criminal groups, but the army itself often becomes part of the problem. In 2006, Mexican President Felipe Calderón officially declared a war on drugs, marking the large-scale deployment of the Mexican army in the fight against cartels. Calderón sent around 20,000 soldiers into the streets to suppress cartel activity. Their primary goals were to neutralize key leaders and dismantle the infrastructure of these organizations. The military employed strategies, such as large-scale operations, to destroy plantations, raid laboratories, and block supply routes. However, cartels quickly adapted to this new adversary, employing guerrilla tactics to avoid direct confrontations with the army. The Mexican army is equipped with a wide range of tools, but cartels are often just as well armed. The army uses armored vehicles to protect convoys from ambushes, helicopters and drones for reconnaissance and airstrikes on cartel bases, and modernized weapons provided in part by U.S. aid programs aimed at combating drug trafficking. The military's involvement has led to some tangible results in the fight against cartels. Each year, the army destroys thousands of hectares of opium poppy and marijuana plantations, arrests key figures like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, and confiscates hundreds of tons of drugs and thousands of illegal weapons. But these successes come at a high cost. Military operations often lead to civilian casualties. Poor intelligence or excessive use of force has caused public outrage among Mexicans. Corruption within the military is another serious issue, with some commanders tempted to work with cartels, selling information about operations or directly collaborating with them. Cartels respond to military intervention with mass killings, attacks on soldiers, and terror campaigns against civilians. One of the most notorious episodes occurred in 2019 in the city of Culiacán, the capital of Sinaloa state. The army attempted to arrest Ovidio Guzman, the son of El Chapo. After Ovidio's capture, the Sinaloa cartel launched a massive assault on the military, blocking roads, setting vehicles on fire, and opening fire on civilians. To avoid further casualties, the government was forced to release Ovidio, a decision that became one of the army's most humiliating defeats. Military intervention in the fight against cartels has produced results that are as complex as the drug trade itself. While some cartels have been significantly weakened, particularly following the capture of their key leaders, this often creates a power vacuum. Instead of bringing peace, it paves the way for newer and more ruthless groups to emerge. One of the most notorious examples is the rise of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, which has proven to be even more violent and strategic than its predecessors. Despite substantial efforts, the cycle of violence continues to spiral. Mexico's drug wars persist with no definitive end in sight, and the military remains the primary force tasked with containing this chaos. Yet, as the conflict evolves, so do the challenges, leaving the nation to grapple with both old and new threats. The Sinaloa cartel has earned its reputation as one of the most resilient and resourceful criminal organizations in history. Its ability to adapt and evolve has allowed it to counter nearly every challenge posed by law enforcement and rival cartels. After decades of relentless efforts from the U.S. and Mexican governments, the central question remains: has progress truly been made, or are we merely delaying the inevitable? The collaboration between the United States and Mexico is multifaceted, tackling the cartel from multiple angles to disrupt its operations and minimize its influence. The extradition of prominent figures, such as Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, to high-security U.S. federal prisons has been a key strategy. This measure ensures that these dangerous criminals are cut off from the extensive networks they could still command while imprisoned in Mexico. Intelligence sharing is another cornerstone of this partnership. Advanced tools, such as satellite surveillance, drone reconnaissance, and undercover agents are employed to track and anticipate cartel activities with greater precision. In financial terms, the United States has invested heavily in Mexico's anti-cartel efforts, contributing over $1.5 billion through the Mérida Initiative to bolster law enforcement and improve infrastructure. Yet, obstacles persist. Corruption within Mexico's political and law enforcement systems remains a significant hurdle, often undermining operations by leaking critical information to the cartel. Furthermore, the cartel's agility in responding to threats often renders enforcement strategies insufficient. On top of that, public resistance to military operations complicates matters further. Civilian casualties and the militarization of urban areas have sparked widespread criticism, leaving governments caught in a delicate balancing act. To sustain its vast empire, the Sinaloa cartel employs sophisticated and innovative methods to launder its immense revenues, which flow through an intricate web of global financial systems and shell companies. In sectors such as construction, tourism, and energy, fake corporations serve as perfect facades for funneling millions of dollars through what appear to be legitimate transactions. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin have become indispensable in this effort, allowing the cartel to obscure the origins and destinations of illicit funds with minimal oversight. In rural areas, impoverished individuals are often unknowingly used as fronts for registering businesses, adding a further layer of anonymity to these schemes. Globally, the cartel exploits offshore banking havens in locations such as Panama, the Cayman Islands, and other jurisdictions with lax financial transparency laws. They also make strategic investments in high-value assets, such as luxury real estate, rare artwork, and collectible items, further embedding illicit wealth into the global economy. Despite the relentless pursuit of justice by international authorities, the Sinaloa cartel continues to wield considerable power, cementing its place as a dominant force in the global drug trade. Leadership under Los Chapitos, Ivan, Alfredo, and Ovidio Guzman, the sons of El Chapo, has ensured that the cartel not only survives, but thrives. This new generation of leaders has diversified its operations, moving beyond cocaine to focus heavily on synthetic drugs like fentanyl. Fentanyl, being cheaper to produce and easier to transport, has become the cartel's most lucrative product, feeding an insatiable demand across the United States. The cartel's control over the last mile of drug distribution gives it unparalleled access to street-level dealers in major U.S. cities. It achieves this through a network of corrupt officials, logistical operators, and street gangs. Terror remains an integral part of the cartel's strategy. Public executions, mass killings, and gruesome displays of violence are used to intimidate rivals and reinforce its dominance. Meanwhile, the cultural mythology surrounding figures like El Chapo perpetuates a romanticized image of the cartel, immortalizing its leaders in folk songs and urban legends. Is victory possible? The fight against the Sinaloa cartel has achieved notable milestones, yet a true victory remains elusive. The arrest and life imprisonment of El Chapo in a U.S. maximum security prison was a major symbolic triumph. Law enforcement agencies have confiscated massive quantities of drugs and seized millions of dollars in illegal assets. Traditional cocaine trafficking routes have been disrupted, forcing the cartel to continually adapt its operations. However, these successes are counterbalanced by the cartel's extraordinary resilience. When one route is compromised, another is established. When key leaders are apprehended, younger, more ambitious figures step in to fill the void. The Sinaloa cartel represents a threat that extends far beyond Mexico's borders. It is not merely a criminal organization, it is a global crisis. This cartel destroys lives, undermines economies, and destabilizes societies on an unprecedented scale. To dismantle its operations is to confront a deeply entrenched shadow system that thrives in the cracks of our world. But the question remains, is the world ready to face this challenge head-on?